Welcome everyone. I was excited to be asked by Ruthie to come and do a little bit of intro and contexting to this, I believe, first in the series, Ruthie, yes? Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be more to come, and I'll let somebody from the higher ed working group talk about that and what these actually are. But today we are going to hear some story from Ruthie. We're going to get to know each other a little bit better. And we're going to talk about sort of ABCD practice within our institutions. Does anybody from the higher ed working group just really quickly want to give a context for these series of meetings or what your plans are? Ruthie, do you, or I know Jenny's here, other folks? Go ahead, Ruthie.
I can say really quickly, so the aim is to attract and welcome stories from folks who are working on ABCD in higher ed contexts. We want, I think, this to be a pretty big tent. So there's no sense in which like the story that Seva and I are kind of co-sharing today is like a format that anyone has to follow. We just welcome stories from folks in a higher ed context. If you used to be in higher ed, you are now, or you will be soon, right? So interpret broadly, but we definitely want folks to sign up. Kim will share a sheet through which you can sign up if you, at some point during the experience today or at the end of our chat, if you decide you'd like to share a story in the upcoming months in the series. We are definitely actively looking for more folks to share in this series.
Thank you for that, Ruthie. All right, well, we are going to have Ruthie is going to share a story. We'll get to know each other better, as I said. Just on page 2 of that slide deck, just some things that are helpful. If you're able to be on camera, we will be in small group. It would be nice. If you're not able, we understand, but you will be asked to participate. It's not going to just be sort of a webinar where Ruthie talks. If you are able to just let us know anytime you want to chat, you can raise your hand on Zoom or like this. That would be great. And then with the tech universe, we always try to have grace with ourselves and each other in case something goes wrong. We'll do our best to do whatever tech issues solving we need to do, and we'll continue on with what's going on. So we're going to just start with some small group introductions so we can know who's in the room and get to know each other a little bit more. So if you look on slide 3, we're just going to be asking for you to, you're going to be in triads and just meet the folks in your room. And just your name, your location, your organization and background, and then what drew you to this session today? That's just going to be the question we're asking you is what drew you to this session today? You saw it, you decided to come, and just get to know some colleagues in the session. Here we go, and you will have 4 minutes with 3 people to share and introduce yourself. Sound good? Thumbs up. Okay, great. Here we go. Faces, that's always a good sign. We'd love it if 1 or 2 folks would be willing to just share out something that you heard that was a success in your small group or something interesting you heard in your small group. We'd love to hear from 1 or 2 folks if anyone's willing to share. You can just go like this and I'll know. I know everyone loves talking in a really big room of strangers. All right, I'm just going to pick on people that I know I can pick on. Mark, did you talk about anything interesting in your group?
Yes, I knew you were going to pick on me. So I got to meet this last round Julian from St. Petersburg, Florida, that is working on creating a community center at the St. Petersburg College, and is very attracted to how to use ABCD principles in that community work. So that was very fascinating. So.
All right, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, Sarah.
We were just having an interesting discussion at the end of our group about the power of ABCD to transform student community engaged learning, to kind of disrupt the savior narrative within conventional service learning arrangements.
Awesome. All right, thank you for sharing. Great. Thank you all for putting your voice into the room. Appreciate it. We are going to do one more round, and this one can be about if you've tried to incorporate ABCD practice or you're not quite clear on how to do it, or anything that you've had that you wouldn't say has gone according to plan, or things that you're sort of struggling with And you'll meet new people. Again, if you meet the same people that is Zoom's doing today, they really want you to get to know each other. Again, introduce yourself. You won't know each other, and this will be our last round, and then we'll get started. Here we go. All right, seeing some more smiling faces, that's great. We'd love to hear from one or two folks about your conversation in small group before we move on. Who's willing to chat with us? Go ahead, Angela.
I'll go. I was talking because I think I have a struggle that probably other people have experienced is I had a project that was ABCD based at my college and everybody was really into it and it went really well. And then I took a new position and the next person that came in wasn't into it. And so it's like, trying to get them back on board. And I think we've all seen that in one way or another. So that was the struggle I presented.
Thanks, Angela. You're getting a lot of head nods there. So, yep, seems pretty salient. I'd love to hear from one more person about something y'all chatted about in your small group. Deborah, you're smiling. Does that mean you have something to share? No, it's okay.
No, I was smiling because the person in my room sent me a link, and I learned about her program. It's called Serve, Learn, Sustain at Georgia Tech, and basically, I mean, their whole program, she said, is really based in and framed around ABCD. And they have a short course for students. Anyway, I was interested in learning more and I was smiling because she sent me the link. So,
yeah, Jenny would likely follow up with you on that too. All right, great. Awesome. Thank you all. I know obviously we'd love to get to know everybody a little bit better. Just on Zoom, quick triads is a way we can get to know a couple of the folks in the room. So much about ABCD practice is getting to understand each other and the ways that we do this. So thank you for that. I'm just going to give a little bit of context. Ruthie's doing this hard. Oh, it wasn't Jenny. Okay. I am going to just give a little bit of context. I would just really love a quick fist of 5 if you all are familiar. Like 5, I'm super familiar with ABCD. I've taken 101. I've taught courses. I understand it. And 1 is I'm just kind of getting my toe wet in ABCD right now. And we just have, and you can be a 2, 3, or 4 if you're in between. So go ahead and just everyone on the screen either do 1, somewhere between a 1 through 5 for me. All right, we got a lot more 1s than I thought. So sorry for the really presumptive questions on the front end. We assumed that this was on our listserv and that you all were very familiar with this and you were practitioners, but this is good to know. You all some of you are really getting your feet wet. So we apologize for the questions. We misunderstood our audience. Welcome. And we'll make sure that we kind of make the linkages for you. This session is going to be a little bit more specifically about ABCD in higher ed, and this is going to be internally. So just as we heard in 2 of those comments, some people in higher ed use this to as a model of how they engage communities they work with. What Ruthie is presenting today is how she's used this and she's worked with ABCD practice internally within an area of Georgia Tech. So it's a little bit of nuanced approach. It's not pure sort of ABCD. We do have an ABCD 101 if you want to get more familiar with the with all of the fundamentals of the ABCD practice. Kim is going to put a link in the chat. We have a virtual training coming up and other training. So if you are here and you're like, I'm not really quite getting what I came for, please do join for one of our 101 courses. We would love to have you in them. What we're here to talk about today is ABCD practice is about transformation in work in communities. And I'm going to just be on slide 8 and 9 and 10 before I pass it off to Ruthie. And so on slide 8, the reason we're talking about communities is because most all of the ABCD practice you'll hear about is in either place-based community or faith-based community or some type of community. And what we're trying to say today is that the group that Ruthie is working with within her own organization in and of itself is a group that has their own community as well. So we're going to be focused internally on that group, and we're going to think about them as transformation with a group. ABCD practice seeks transformation. And the kind of transformation ABCD seeks in the groups that it works with or in the communities that we work with. That's on page 9. Is sort of this idea of from a consumer or recipient, from people perceiving themselves to being that way, to a producer within a community. And so for folks who have had people externally come and say, these are the services, or internally that you need in order to be better, we want to see folks as being producers of sort of their own lives. ABCD practice believes in sort of moving from a deficit mentality and looking at all the things we don't have to an abundance mentality. What are all the things that we do have, and how do we use those things to make them work, to help us get to where we want to go. ABCD practice also sort of tries to take folks from the individual to sort of the collective. And so if this is just one person, we do really rely on people's individual skills and gifts, but how do we also take that into a collective? ABCD practice sort of moves from professionals have the expertise when you're doing community-based work to the idea that residents have the expertise, and that if you live in that space, you have the expertise that you need in that space. And the last sort of transformation we are seeking is that we don't have what we need as part of ABCD practice to we have everything that we need. We just want you to sort of think about that transformational journey. If you're familiar with ABCD practice, that a group starts at point A, and ultimately we are trying to support them and facilitate their work into point B. And Ruthie is going to share a story of transformation with the group that she worked with, from sort of the elements they co-created to sort of where they were to where they wanted to be. And Ruthie, I don't think I'm going to do that other slide. I just got rid of it, and I'm just going to sort of push it off to you for now, if that's enough context. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. Ruthie asked me to be here. I've worked with Ruthie at Georgia Tech, and I am the current board chair of the ABCD Institute. My name is Seva. Lovely to meet you, and I will turn it over to Ruthie.
Thank you, Seva. It's such a pleasure to see y'all today. Thank you so much for making time for this, and being willing to kind of be in this space where maybe we're all at different kind of points in our paths. I'm Ruthie Yao. I work at, Deborah mentioned it already, so thank you for the little lead in, Deborah. I work at the Center for Serve, Learn, Sustain at Georgia Tech. And there are a few other Serve, Learn, Sustainers in the group today. And we do community engagement and service learning and community engaged learning in our space, and we do it from an ABCD perspective. So certainly that's a part of a context for my work and my perspective, but I'm going to talk specifically about a different initiative that isn't actually housed in our office. And I will, and I'll share a little bit about as Seva said, the journey of that initiative. And I welcome y'all to interrupt me along the way. If there's anything you want clarification on, welcome to do that. We'll also ask for kind of points of clarification, a little feedback at the end. After I share, we will, again, have sort of points of clarity and questions, and then have some time to do small group discussion about what you heard and kind of what you're processing. So not too much talking from me, I hope, in the balance of time for you to share and process together. So if you'll join me on 11, this is not the whole group. This is a small group of people, which, as I'll say more about in a moment, represented our larger group in a Diversity Champions Award ceremony last year. So the group was recognized for its work by Institute Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Georgia Tech. And I'll say a little bit more about how this all works. So on slide 12, you'll see this is a group journey image. And I'm going to model, as you guys see, Seva offered us in her introduction on slides 9 and 10. She offered us a from and to, right? Where are we now and where are we trying to get? And sort of as a moment of total disclosure, wise or unwise, I'm not sure, is, when I created the group journey from to, and I'm here on slide 12, if you all see that cute little curvy arrow, and then from to, I created the from to, right? Those weren't collectively created. Those are from my experience in the group, my experience at Georgia Tech, and my own kind of who I am in this group I'm going to describe. So that's kind of some disclosure on the from too. But I want to talk a little bit more about why I see in from stagnancy, hierarchy, secrecy, and a mishmash of viewpoints, why I see those as relevant in sort of where we are, and then what I see as critical to where we're going. And you all see in that column on 12, risk-taking and creative, collaborative, not bound by hierarchy, productively confrontational, transparent and open in our operations, and having a consensus around a racial analysis. So I'm gonna and also there's sort of a to the horror of anyone in the room who does graphic design, you've already looked at these slides and thought this is a total disaster. I don't know if I can deal with this. This is horrifying, these slides. It is totally me, it's not Seva, understand that. But you'll see that the little icons on the slides, the colored icons on the slides are little spots on the journey. So the aqua, the orange, the red, the gray, etc. So we're going to move together onto slide 13. And I actually just edited these as we were talking because I was thinking about the fact that there are some folks in the room who are a little newer to ABCD. And so I wanted to include some, in italics, you'll see some words and phrases that are kind of help us revisit or help us kind of coalesce around tenets of ABCD, just really basic. So in italics on slide 13, you'll see the questions. What is the motivation for the group to act? What is the collective purpose that a wide circle of people can act on together? And who is committed to act? And so we know, right, ABCD is the way that we build relationships in order to take collective action. And in this context at Georgia Tech in 2020, and also, right, we know what the broader societal context is in the early months of 2020 and in the summer of 2020, there's an enormous amount of tumult socially and politically around racial violence, around white supremacy, and around police violence. So there were two collectives forming at Georgia Tech during this time. One was forming really under the auspices of Institute Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, right? So in some institutions, as y'all know, there's a more kind of dispersed way of approaching race and equity, right? Some institutions don't have centers for race and equity or institute diversities, right? Georgia Tech is a place where there's centralized, a centralized entity that works on diversity and equity, which I think, as we all know from interacting with institutions, is relevant, right? It means that there's a certain group of people in charge of doing diversity things, right? And then if you work outside of that office, then the actions that you take around those themes may be in conjunction with the office or they may not be. And in the case of this collective, we wanted to draw on the energies and gifts of that office, as well as drawing on the gifts of people who have no affiliation with that central entity. So the collective was formed in a single division, and it was formed out of a group of people who maybe had worked with the Central Institute Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or maybe hadn't, but knew that they wanted to do work to advance anti-racism and equity in our division. And it wasn't a group of people who had a certain vision of what that looked like, right? But it was a group of people who knew, I have gifts, I want to give time to this. I feel that it's urgent in my institution and in my life, and I want to be with other people who also have those feelings. So we formed the collective as a way to have conversations that could lead to action. We didn't form the collective around a single pre-articulated goal, if that distinction makes sense. If you'll join me on slide 14, you'll see here, and this is, as you, many of you know, at the core of how you mobilize assets is identifying them, right? And doing that in a really explicit way. So when we came together, we recognized each other's gifts, and basically formed, and this really is quite, you know, higher ed, formed subcommittees around them. One doesn't always form subcommittees around gifts in ABCD practice, right? But in this situation, and you all see I made a quick list on slide 14, who are the people who came together and what did they come with? So we had folks who specialize in data and assessment. We had folks who had already done anti-racism and equity and sort of history of race in America kind of teaching and syllabus building. We had people, and this is pretty critical, right? And this is really one of those contexts where ABCD in higher ed is is pretty different than ABCD in communities. And this is a space of tension and productive, I think productive tension, which is that we had leadership team members in the collective. So, and that meant that there was in fact a recognition of the hierarchy that is our context. We wanted leadership members, right? We wanted some of the bosses in this work because they make the decisions when it comes down to it around policy change. So if we wanted to influence policy change, we needed to make sure that there were people at the table who had some power over that process in the hierarchy arrangement at our institution. So in addition to those folks, we had logistics folks, always essential and wonderful, and then participatory facilitation trained people. And that was, thank you so much, Kim, for copying the slide deck. Those were people who Seva trained, right? So the members of the collective submitted a proposal to get trained in participatory facilitation, and Seva came and did a 3-day training with us, and that helped us create a shared that gave us skills that we all shared and then could continue to share with our colleagues. That meant too that we understood what participation was. We weren't operating along assumptions that weren't articulated about what it means to participate and how you get others to do so. So that was really critical too. I think that helped us understand that there isn't something natural or organic or predetermined about having a collective in which everyone participates, right? You have to say what it means to participate, and you have to understand how to support others in doing so. So that was really wonderful kind of skill set for us to share. If you'll join me on 15, I've divided here among those types of people, what were their contributions that made because of the gifts that they brought, the energy that they brought, right? So as folks disseminated and then kind of decoded and analyzed the results of a climate survey. I'm going to say a little bit more about that survey in a minute because it was a challenge. And then the teachers and anti-racism scholars put together sections of a introduction to Georgia Tech. Like many institutions that y'all I'm sure are familiar with offer courses that are sort of, here's a 1-credit course to get to know this institution. We created sections of that course that were focused on equity and anti-racism and helping freshmen sort of get to know their new institution, Georgia Tech, and understand how to pursue and engage with equity and anti-racism themed work while they were at Tech. The leadership team folks got together with other folks in the collective to talk about equity in pay and equity in hiring. And then our logistics and event gurus organized a division-wide town hall. And the facilitation trained members, right, trained in participatory facilitation, led discussions in that town hall on the tougher kind of results from that climate survey. And those were results around feelings of alienation, feelings that people worked in a racist institution that didn't recognize itself as a racist institution, and feelings that they worked in an institution that was opaque in its operations, right, which lacked transparency and which made promises that it didn't follow through on. So that climate survey offered us data that we then shared out and facilitated conversations around, conversations that people were in reviewing the assessment of the event really felt excited about participating in, but then didn't necessarily have a set of actions to pursue after they left the town hall, right? So the town hall included many more people than those just in the collective, and it embraced kind of some of these tougher conversations around the kind of institution that we work in and how it needs to change. So then if y'all will join me on 16, so on the journey, on the little curvy arrow journey, here we're at growth and accomplishments, which lead necessarily into the next slide, where challenges and what's next. But here on 16 in growth and accomplishments, so our group grew in size. It was recognized with the award that I referenced earlier for contributions to equity and inclusion on campus. It spurred recognition of a need for a director of equity initiatives. So that's a new position that doesn't exist right now, but will exist in the future because of the work of this collective. The group was asked to supply a formal budget request. And again, I would just take a quick kind of sidebar opportunity to say, here's another really important distinction when we talk about working in ABCD in higher ed, is that budgets and getting money for stuff from people is really kind of inextricable from the processes and projects and initiatives that we undertake. So we did, recognize as a group, we wanted money for certain initiatives, and we were asked to supply a budget for that money, right? So being a funded group was something that we wanted, but it also came with conversations that I think helped us realize that a collective can be at a cultural, have cultural dissonance in a hierarchical institution like Georgia Tech, right? We wanted to stick with our collective structure, but as soon as we're a group with a budget, and as soon as we have to steward a budget and then continue to articulate sturdy plans for spending money, the kind of organic nature of the collective and the way that people were exchanging duties and sharing duties was already beginning to shift, right? We already were beginning to see some of the kind of calcification, I think, that happens when you have, when you're operating in that institutional context and operating on someone else's money. And then, I've talked a little bit more here on this slide about bringing a speaker to campus and engaging students to support our work. Another kind of interesting part of this collective is that there have been a couple of students engaged with the work, but it's mostly staff. And there is ongoing discussion about whether or not students should be in this staff group, right? And what that, and ongoing discussion about gifts of students, right? The really distinctive gifts of students who know particular things about the institution that staff people don't know, and who have particular interests and visions for change that staff don't necessarily share. What would it look like really to have a student staff group instead of just a staff group? And so finally on 17, you can see I have, like we all enjoy doing, right? You take some, little arrows to introduce the snarliest possible things, and then you say, I'm done, thanks. But basically, we're at a point of transition now. Two of the founders of the group basically have been either left their roles or have been reorganized into other divisions. So the group now is expanding out of our home, right? One of an ABCD kind of tenet is that ABCD necessarily has a home. Earlier, Seva said, right, ABCD is place-based. So this is sort of a tension here is in an institution like ours, when we have a specific context of a specific division, what happens when people get organized out of it, out of their control? And what happens when people outside of it want to come in, right? Then does the vision of the group expand to the whole institute, the whole institution? Or does the vision of the group really stay constrained by the specific context of a cluster of offices? So the excitement of having an expanding group combined with the challenges of really remaining home focused, right? Remaining place focused in the sense of having a group of people who share a really specific context within the institute. And then this other, the nut that we haven't cracked, and in some ways perhaps aren't equipped to crack quite yet, which is the fact that we don't share a racial analysis in the group, that we're an equity group that as a collective has never really had a conversation about how each person would answer the question, how does white supremacy focus in our context? How does white supremacy focus? How does white supremacy function and impact our institution, right? So each person in the group would probably have a different answer, or maybe there would be 3 or 4 kinds of answers to that question, but we are a group focused on equity who doesn't yet have an articulated shared analysis of race and racism at our institution. So I told you I would just say some crazy, snarly stuff, and then I would close. So that's what I'm doing. Thank you for your patience with the narrative. And I'm honored to sort of have your ears, because I know there's so many people in this room who have really powerful experience and a lot of wisdom to share. So I'm really grateful for that. I'll hand it back over to Seva, because as I said, we'll do a little bit of talking as a big group and then more talking in small groups.
Thank you, Ruthie, for sharing and for taking us through all of your work. It's great. Just want to start off, any questions of clarity for Ruthie? Just things that you didn't ask while she was chatting, but just things you didn't quite understand, or sort of gaps in knowledge, just questions of clarity for Ruthie. And if you do, you can just raise your hand in some way or put a note in the chat. And if there are no questions of clarity, then my question becomes, what is a word or a phrase or something that Ruthie shared that is just sort of standing out for you? And folks can type that in the chat, or again, raise their hand, just something that's standing out about what Ruthie shared.
I have a question. I was trying to get back from my slides to my Zoom, so that's why it took so long. I was thinking about, I understand how like sort of the asset-based piece in terms of how you organize the groups in terms of plan. I guess, like, have you continued those groups, and are they doing implementation, or is it sort of still in the plan? Are you still at the point of having these conversations? I understand the conversations themselves are one of the strategies, but I mean, where do you go? I mean, I just never thought about having groups organized like that. That it seems like we always say, well, what are you most interested in, or what falls in your area of expertise, rather than your sort of where you have skills.
Yeah, Deborah, that's a great question. Thank you so much. So we are, yeah, I mean, I guess we're midstream, I would say, right? And we are still in these kind of gift-based subcommittees. We always offer folks the opportunity to, if something else is calling you, then move into some other initiative, move on to another committee. But we're continuing to work in our kind of, gifts-based committees. And I think too, we haven't, this is another piece that I didn't address, is we had a, new member meeting and really didn't talk explicitly about gifts and assets at that meeting. I think because it may have felt like we were, I don't know, really just trying to onboard folks as quick as we could, right? Let's move the work forward. And I think that that's another really interesting piece, right? Is that there's a tension between a kind of real efficiency and effectiveness mindset in higher ed and a kind of slow, patient relationship building and trust building work. So I think I love that you asked that, Deborah, because I think something that we're encountering too that we haven't articulated is that as new people come in, we have to continue to take the time to relationship build and get to know each other's gifts and identify how those gifts apply to the current work or how they need to lead to new work, rather than kind of just let's get you in the work. We have a meeting next Thursday. So I don't think I answered your question well, but thank you for helping me gain clarity. I appreciate it.
Thanks for that question, Deborah. And thanks for those in the chat. Mark noted that what stood out for him is no shared analysis of racism and racial equity, and unpacking equity in higher education stood out. An opaque structure of the institution also stood out for folks. So thanks, folks, for sharing that out. And Myra, I believe, or David and Myra noted something about involving students as a key. Do you want to bring that to the full group, Myra, and just sort of say what you were putting in chat?
Well, sure. Well, one thing that we've learned over and over in all of our work with groups of kids and with programs that take kids from their homes and put them in an artificial setting is that without their input, it doesn't give them the power that they're going to need to impact their communities and the world. And by getting their viewpoints, then we can look at it from their viewpoints and see things through their eyes, so that it isn't, okay, looking at it from an institutional standpoint, we have to follow these guidelines, we have to follow these parameters because this is where the money comes from or whatever, which is all important. But if that becomes the primary focus, then it's again trying to make the square peg fit the round hole. And these are the young people who are living in the community, whether it's the college campus or the community at large. And they know firsthand what the challenges are. And so if we can help them to see how the principles of ABCD help them to navigate through life and help them to make the world a better place, then they can take those tools, and then they can help teach and mentor the ones coming behind them. And that's how I think that the community can grow from the inside out, rather than another thing being perceived as being done to and for them.
Thank you for that, Myra. Yeah, and when Ruthie and I were chatting earlier, we talked about how this is the institution inside out, kind of trying to do that work within an organization as a sort of a community. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Helen, for your note in the chat. You're welcome to bring it in, or we can just sort of read it out loud. Complicated negotiations from ABCD, asset-based orientation. It will take patience and perseverance. Anything else to add to that, Helen, or does that sum it up for you? You can just give me a thumbs up if you're good. All right, thumbs up, great. Okay, just a few more questions before we go into some small group for questions. My next question is sort of, where were you, go ahead, Lucy, I see your hand up. I'll pose my next question, and then you can bring your thoughts into the room. Just where were you pulled in, or where were you excited about something that Ruthie was sharing? But Lucia, go ahead and share what you wanted to share.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about the part that Ruth said about, like when leadership rotates out, like, do you have a process? Like, do you always develop leadership that's ready to take on if other people leave the leadership teams or the committees?
That's a great question, Lucia. Thank you. No, I mean, we've maintained a non-hierarchical structure. So there is no one who leads a subcommittee, and there's no one who leads the group. There are, I think, again, a tension in the language and culture of a collective is there are natural leaders, right? There are people who seem to take greater initiative, or they have a, that's their work style, right? Is to sort of be in that role. But I think one of the interesting things, certainly from an asset-based perspective, is how do we continue to energize and mobilize the gifts of everyone in the group when a couple of people who seem to, through charisma or whatever, really motivate everyone to stay mobilized, right, and to continue to mobilize their gifts. What do you do in sort of in the departure of a couple of those charismatic folks? I think it's both an ABCD question, but it's also just kind of a dynamics of the group challenge as well.
Thanks, Ruthie, and thanks, Cecilia, for that question. Just a question that I'd asked is sort of, where did you find yourself pulled in, or sort of excited about what Ruthie was sharing? Folks can just type it in the chat. We have 2 more questions before a small group, or you can say it out loud. Just someplace you found yourself leaning in. I'll wait it out. I am so comfortable with silence. I have no problem waiting it out. Just somewhere where you found yourself leaning in, or sort of drawn into what Ruthie was sharing. Go ahead, Howard. Yes, somebody breaks. Nobody likes it. Somebody will break. Go ahead, Howard.
Well, I guess what's rolling through my mind is, the value of ABCD as an approach in communities is to me always around individuals with gifts and talents creating associations that build power within the community to create change. And when you're doing it inside an institution, that's complicated because institutions are hierarchical, right? And so I'm wondering, this is like maybe a trick question, but I'm wondering to what degree you have felt that there's been power built from this sort of grassroots level within the institution as a result of your work.
Yeah, that's great, Howard. Thank you for that. I mean, I think I referenced the fact that the kind of higher up leadership had proposed a new position, Director of Equity Initiatives. I think there's a sense in which that's a product of power building, right? A kind of enough pressure on a group of people to recognize that there's a gap. But I think also our reaction as a group to that was really mixed because we felt like the work of the collective was to draw, organically and non-hierarchically on our shared gifts, rather than to take instruction from a person with that designated role. So I think, yes, I think there's evidence that we have built some power, but I think because of the context, because of the contradictions of this context, it's a mixed blessing to build enough power to make to sort of pressure a staffing or a structure change. So yeah, thank you for that question. So it's something I think we, as a group, we're kind of grappling with.
And anyone else is also welcome to respond to these questions. We don't have to put it all on Ruthie to have all the answers here. So I'm sure other folks have tried these things, so you're also welcome to bring your voice. And thank you for that, Howard. Anyone else where you found yourself drawn in, or somewhere where you just find your mind wandering or feeling like not like it wasn't resonating with you as much, but it was bringing up a lot of questions for you? Either or. All right, go ahead, Dave Taylor.
Dave. Hi, everyone.
Okay.
So one of the things I like best about the asset-based ABCD approach is the undiscovered gifts. In my experience, I've been at Niagara University for 23 years, and it's the same folks who come together for these sorts of things, right? And I, mainly because I look, I guess, but I will find people with gifts and talents that there was a woman who worked in admissions for years, and she invited me to a fundraiser for the local arts community as she was on the board. And I thought, why? I wonder what the connection is there, why she's on the board, right? And turns out she's a Juilliard trained musician that I didn't know. I just had this image of her as working for admissions. So I guess what I'm asking Ruth is, across the campus, has there been any effort to look for those undiscovered gifts, people who could bring something to this discussion that we never thought they would have brought? I don't know if I'm being clear. I apologize.
So clear. I love that. I think that's beautiful. And I think yeah, Dave, you're tuning into something really, really crucial. And that's that the gifts that I identified are actually the gifts associated with the work that those people do, right? And you're suggesting that those people have a lot of gifts that aren't engaged in their professional work that are probably important to our work together. Is that right?
Or that there might be other people on campus also that might also have gifts to contribute. Is that correct, Dave?
Yeah, and you wouldn't normally, people can self-invite obviously, but you wouldn't think to go to them first, right? Because there's a great little book, oh gosh, it's really about, it's called How to Transform a College. And it's about how Elon College had, I might be confusing this with the undergraduate experience book. I think it's the latter. And the new, in the book, it's a few years old now, the president, one of the most recent presidents at Elon, in his opening address to the university, only mentioned 2 people by name. One was a longtime faculty member who either was retiring or getting ready to retire, and then somebody who I think worked for their food services on campus, right? But that person was incredibly important to the campus, even though they were a vendor essentially. But they were the person that the students would go to who worked at night. It was sort of a de facto counselor or you name it, right? And I find that we tend not to look in those directions if people don't have the titles.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, and Dave's calling out too that there's a huge advantage from the perspective of any group that's based in a specific division or unit. When you do begin to grow, you do have this increased kind of a wonderfully kind of wider net cast, right? For folks who are interested in the work and have gifts for it and just weren't part of the initial audience or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yep, and Mara put discovering one another's gifts. That is the bedrock of ABCD. Correct, it is. Thanks for noting that. We are going to go into small group with 2 questions, just a smaller group to chat with. Everyone can share. They're on page 18. You'll have about 10 to 12 minutes in small group. I'll let you know and I'll keep time. So in what ways does the story Ruthie shared make you think about your own institutional work differently, or sort of what is the journey that you've been on with your work within, if you're in higher ed or if you're working with communities? It doesn't even have to be organization, but with the communities that you're working with. And then the second question is some of ways that throughout this discussion and Ruthie's sort of contexting, if there's some way that your imagination has been sparked of what you could do in your own community that you're working with or in your institution or organization. So again, you'll have about 10 to 12 minutes in small group, and then we'll check in on you and we'll come back as a whole group then. Thumbs up if you're good to go. All right, here we go. And then if you do want to take notes on page 19 and 20 of the deck, there is a place for you to do that. So here we go into some small groups. Miranda, are you? I think I put Miranda there. Ruthie, how you feeling? Good?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right, I see some smiling faces. We assume maybe 1 or 2 groups answered our questions and we assumed other groups just talked about whatever they were going to talk about. But we would love to hear about what you chatted about. And so we can hear from a few folks, your conversations in small groups, and then we are going to begin to wrap up. Terry, you got a smile on your face.
Okay,
and you're unmuted.
This is Terry. Yeah, our little group talked a little bit about how do you really do ABCD in a hierarchical structure. And I think that's a really important question for us to work with. And of course, it comes right at the heart of many of the concerns within the ABCD network about how you blend movement and institutions. And so I was really interested in that question.
Thank you for that, Terry. Anyone else? Any other juicy questions or conversations in small groups that we'd be willing to bring to the large group? Looks like Jenny might be willing to unmute.
Oh goodness, Terry and I were in the same group. It was Terry, Howard, and me, and then two other fantastic people, but maybe Sid. We just left when there was a suggestion that there might have been something interesting for you to share. Would you like to share something? Is Sid still with us?
Yep.
I don't know. If you don't have anything, you can ignore me, but if you have anything you'd like to share, I cede the floor to you.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Well, I was in the same group, obviously, and I think pretty much Terry summed it up, and I'm making a transition from, I'm really new to ABCD. I was in the intro course in November, and so I'm trying to make this transition, trying to really understand common knowledge, coming from a background of community development, but my focus really has been on, and from an institutional perspective and institutional background. So not only is the hierarchy question, but also how there are perimeters, you know, working with the federal government and working for the federal government and local government for years. How do you really kind of involve and integrate ABCD when those perimeters are going to continue to be there? So that's pretty much why I'm here. I'm really interested to hear how to really kind of move in that type of environment, because those perimeters are not going to go anywhere.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody have any thoughts or response to that? And their own experience with that? Well, thank you, Sid. Yep, and that is something that we all think about a whole lot and spend a lot of time. You know, a lot of ABCD practice happens in communities, and then a lot of it is trying to get institutions to lead by stepping back, and that's its own huge pile of work. And it's not for the faint of heart. All right, anybody else, anything else in small groups that you are willing to share with us, or any other nuggets of wisdom that we can leave with today? I don't know if Hunter, you were going and reaching forward to do something else, but you look, oh, okay, there you go. You gotta be careful when you kind of lean forward. I'm like, you might be interested in speaking. All right, Kim, I think you have some announcements to make, yes?
Yeah, so I'm Kim Hopes. I'm the Assistant Director of ABCD Partnerships here at the Stain Center at DePaul. And I wanted to just really encourage any of you who have stories that you'd like to submit for one of these Tuesday morning events. We're going to be running them from, as Seva said earlier, from January. The next one will be February. We'll have one February through May, and we're taking applications now. It's a Google form, and I'm going to put it in the chat one more time, especially for those who came later. But we're taking submissions until January 28th. So if you would like to apply, or if you know someone in your university or just a colleague, please spread the word. And the other thing I wanted to just mention again is we are running a introduction to ABCD that's going to take place on Saturdays. There are going to be 4 Saturdays in a row starting January 29th. From I think 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's a virtual ABCD introductory class. So I will also put that in the chat as well. So thanks so much.
If I can add on, can I add on one thing to that? Or
absolutely.
2 things actually. One is the way that Ruthie and Seva did this is kind of, one of them was the presenter and one was the facilitator. So if you have some stories you'd like to share, and they don't have to be huge success stories. They can be efforts to incorporate ABCD into any part of higher ed work. If you would like to do it, but you would like a facilitator to help you plan and then do it like you just saw, Seva, I think, is available for everyone. No, seriously, all of us have, many of us on the call are part of the ABCD Institute and the ABCD in Higher Ed work group, and are invested in making this series work. So sign up and or put in an application and I want to do this, but I need someone else to do it with me, or I want someone else to facilitate the conversation. And Kim will find one of us will be able to help you. So please do that. The other is that we do have an ongoing ABCD and higher ed work group that planned this series, but we also do other things and we have ongoing conversation and get to know each other. If you're interested, you're not necessarily interested in participating or sharing a story right now, but you would like to start being part of that work group, or at least come to the next meeting. We're meeting next week, I think on Friday. Anyway, if you let Kim know, she can put you on that list, and you are welcome to, ABCD never says no to anybody. So we are constantly looking for more people to join the conversation, and you're very welcome.
Thank you for that, Jenny. And the final note that I was also going to make is we are in the midst of our own transition as an organization as well, and becoming more associational. And we are about to, in the next 6 months, have a way for folks to join the Institute as a member if you want to be an institution-based practitioner, community-based practitioner. And we'll be hosting a lot more of these things where folks who are doing ABCD practice in similar ways can share materials with each other, can share stories with each other, and hopefully have continuous dialogue in this way, so we can support each other as we're trying to do this sort of paradigm shift work, which is not easy, and again, not for the faint of heart. So just want to let you know that we are ourselves as an organization going through a transition, and hopefully there'll be just plenty more ways to engage in the future with the Institute. With that, anyone else, anything else before we head off today? And Kim, you put your email address incorrectly in the thing. So,
I did? Oh my gosh.
So you're going to want to fix, well, DePaul is just spelled wrong, but that's it.
I'll re-put it in.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you, Ruthie, for sharing your story.
Thank you, Seva.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, you guys.